worship director at a church in Chandler, Arizona called One Church, and I also play in a band called The Praise Record. This is my annual installment of Pedalboard walkthrough, which was never intended to be an annual thing, but I keep changing stuff. So if you haven't seen any of the others, welcome. If you have, you'll notice they're almost all new pedals. Here is an overview of the board. I have almost totally redone it since the last two videos. And I'll go in signal chain order, which is starting at the top right, across, and then right to left on the bottom as well. So I get a lot of questions about signal chain order. It's pretty much right to left on here. First up in line, I have my compressor. I've always started with the compressor, but before it was always an MXR Dynacomp. And I still really like the Dynacomp, but I decided I wanted to get something a little more subtle and a little lower noise floor. So I have subbed it out for the Diamond Compressor Junior here, which is a very highly regarded compressor in like guitar gear circles. It's also, without getting too far into compressor types, this is an optical compressor as opposed to a Ross style, which is what the Dynacomp was. And in general, optical compressors are a little more subtle, have a little less obvious squash of your signal. I still have the compression knob pretty high on here, so I'm getting more squash out of it than some might, but in general, the main difference I noticed was a huge decrease in the background noise floor that I was getting. As soon as I subbed it out for the Dynacomp, it was like the sound when I'm not playing dropped from like a low level to like nothing. So I really like it. It's a nice compressor. I'll just A/B it on and off really quick. Here's without compression. And then here's with. So I am using it as a slight boost. My signal is maybe a little bit louder overall when it's on, but in general, it's bringing up the quieter parts and it's kind of rounding out the signal and making it sound a little more full and processed as compared to just a plain guitar into an amp sound. So that's on all the time. I don't ever kick it on or off. Then second in the chain is this MXR micro amp, which has only one knob, as you can see, and it's just a boost. You can really crank it and it can make you a whole lot louder to where your amp starts breaking up. I keep it a little on the low side there, but it's my first gain stage. It still pretty much sounds clean, but depending on the amp that I'm running it into, things kind of start breaking up. So if I'm going along without it, kind of and then kick it on. You start to get a little bit of grit on the sound. So I use that when I'm still pretty much playing clean in the song, but maybe we hit a chorus or something and I want to take things up just a notch. Then third in the chain, well, third give or take, I'll show you my secret pedal at the end. Third in the chain is the TC Electronic Polytune, which is my tuner. There isn't much to go over with the tuner. It tunes the guitar. I only use it one string at a time, like this, like any typical tuner, but it is the Polytune gimmick is that you can strum all the strings and it'll kind of show you which ones are out. I don't find that to be as accurate, so I don't really get into that much, but if you had one string go out way out of tune during a song and you wanted to quickly figure out which one it was, I guess that would probably be helpful. Next up in the chain is my first modulation pedal, which is the Electro-Harmonix Small Stone. It's a phaser, and I had never really used phasers before or liked them, and I still don't really like most phasers, but I really like the Small Stone. And part of the reason for that is this color switch right here, which I don't know in electrical terms what that's doing, but I know that it makes it a little more subtle and less obvious. Also, another key to that is keeping the rate kind of low. So here is how I would usually use this, with the color switch down and the rate towards the low end. And you can use it on like cleans to give it kind of a sense of whoosh or movement. By way of comparison, here's the color switch up. And then here's with the rate higher, which I really start to not like phasers when the rate is cranked like this. So that would be an example of the type of phaser noise I'm trying not to get. But it's very useful on clean parts, especially clean parts with a lot of open strings that are just kind of looping. Just to give it a sense of movement and kind of keep things interesting sounding. And then next to that is my trusty Micro POG here. It's my octave pedal, and I still use it for most of the same things that I go over in the other videos, but basically doubling leads to make them sound interesting. So something like this. As opposed to just without. And then it's still awesome for swells, doing like organ type stuff. I'm gonna kick on some reverbs and things under it. So it adds a really nice high-end kind of organ-y shimmer to fade-ins and things like that. Next up here I have my second gain stage after the MXR micro amp, and this is for when I do actually want to get into some overdrive. I use this Timmy. Which is a pretty common, when you get into like people who are really into gear, the Timmy comes up a lot. It's like really well known in gearhead circles and not very well known in the real world, but it is one of my first boutique pedals that I've gotten, and it's replaced an Ibanez Tube Screamer on my board, which I did keep. It's on a different board. I like the Tube Screamer, but it has a pronounced, it compresses your signal a lot, and it has a really pronounced like mid-range boost that I decided I wanted to get away from. But what I really like about the Timmy, it's a transparent overdrive, which has become kind of a buzzword, but it doesn't boost any specific frequencies. It just kind of, I feel like the notes that I'm playing and the chords that I'm playing still come through really intact with just some grit on them. So here's without it. And then here's with. If I want to get a little more out of it, I can start stacking gain stages, and I can click on the Timmy and the micro amp. So having a couple of fairly transparent, like grit adding machines on here helps me to really get a couple of different ranges of tones. So I can go fully clean, you know, a little gritty, medium, or bonus medium. And then here on the corner of the board is my Source Audio Orbital Modulator, which is kind of a catch-all modulation pedal. I had started accumulating. I had a flanger and a chorus and a tremolo and then the small stone phaser that I was kind of switching on and off every single service. And I don't use a lot of modulation, but different songs need different types. So it was like it was a lot of effort for something I wasn't using that often. And I have a separate video about this quest, but I kind of embarked on a quest to find like a single pedal that had most of the modulation stuff in it. And I landed on the Source Audio, which sounds awesome and is super versatile. It has way more knobs and deep features and editing than I ever use. But you can have 2 presets, and so what I've preset it to is a tremolo and a chorus right now, but the chorus spot is kind of a floater. I can stick whatever I'm going to use in the service in that slot. Tremolo is a little harder to dial in, so I keep that permanently in there. But here's my straight up signal. And then here's my tremolo preset. And then you can assign the other foot switch to be a tap tempo, which I have permanently set up on the tremolo. So it gives me a tap tremolo, which is amazing because most actual dedicated tremolo pedals don't even have that. So I can set it to like the tempo of the song. And then my other preset right now is a chorus, something like this. So that's kind of a medium subtle chorus. I can get really obvious ones going on here if I want to. And then if I want to pull up a flanger, here's one of those. So that's my whatever modulation I happen to be using in the service floating pedal there. It's an awesome fix for having a bunch of different modulations, and honestly, every preset I've pulled up on it sounds as good or better than the pedals that it's replacing. So I'm a huge fan of this Orbital modulator. Then hopping down here to the bottom row, I've got my trusty volume pedal here, which I use for swells. Which of course sound better with some reverb and delay on them. That's all that's for. Sometimes I'll pull it heeled down to cut out my signal if I need to like put a capo on or something really quick and I don't want noise coming through. But one thing about this Dunlop is that it kind of tends to return to the on position by itself most of the time, so I don't like make minor volume adjustments throughout the service on it or anything. It's pretty much just for swells. And then next up is the Rat here, which is my final gain stage. It's full-on distortion for like rock songs, and I have it dialed in with the distortion kind of midway up, but the filter and the volume pretty high. So here's what this one sounds like. So that's the one I would use if I was doing any kind of a rock type thing or power chords. And it also has a really great sound for leads. I'm gonna kick on a delay here. So that's my favorite distortion pedal ever. So to me, the key to the Rat pedal, and especially using it in like a worship service, is really mastering this filter knob in the middle here. And I'll show you why. The sound I have it dialed in at is kind of a rounded, like it's got some gain on it, but it's not harsh sounding. But if you lower the filter knob, here's it down to like about halfway. Which is, to my ears at least, very harsh and kind of piercing. And here's with it rolled almost totally off. So I always keep the filter almost maxed out, like it's up almost all the way. Next up I have my primary delay, the Boss DD20. I pretty much only bought it because I needed something with a tap tempo, but it's served awesomely in that function. So here is, I used this pedal for the tap tempo, and this one is the on and off. And then at the end of my board here, I have a mode switcher for the DD20 that goes through the different presets. So for space reasons, it's really far removed from the DD20 itself, but that's the third pedal for it. And you can have it set up the other way where this switches modes and that one's a tap tempo, but I really like tapping on these big meaty Boss foot switches as opposed to the little clicky one. So I have it set up where this is always my tap. I have a separate DD20 video where I go into all the modes more in depth, but the three that I use the most often are I have saved as presets, and they are just like a straight analog delay, which I found works really well for like leads and things where I don't want the delay to be overpowering, but I do want it on there. So here's like a lead with the analog delay going. So that sounds really nice. You can hear they decay into the background and become kind of darker as they echo, which is the key feature of like an analog simulation. And then I have a preset for dotted eighth delay, which I have using the standard mode, which sounds the most like my DD3 that I got rid of to fit this on here. It's a clean digital delay without any real character of its own. It's just kind of like a clean repeat of what you're playing. And then I have it dialed in for dotted eighth so that I can do this type of thing. And then my second preset here is using the tape mode, and it's kind of a long, like, ambient delay. So those are the three modes I use the most often on the DD20. It's got other stuff it can do, but those are really nice. My other delay, really my favorite delay, is this TC Electronic Flashback. And honestly, I love how it sounds. I like the sounds on it. I like the sounds on it a lot better than the DD20, but it doesn't have a tap tempo, so it's just really not that usable live. It has some kind of a thing where you can hold down the button and like strum the tempo, but I've never gotten that to work correctly. So my compromise I came up with is the DD20's on here for like just typical songs, things where I'm playing leads and I need a little bit of delay and it doesn't really matter what it sounds like. And then the Flashback is for like ambient songs where I really want to hear the delay and I really want it to have like some character. So I use this on tape mode almost all the time with a little higher effect level and feedback. It's got many other things it's capable of, but for typical like analog delays and straight digital delays and stuff, I'd probably be using the DD20. So the Flashback tends to live in tape mode. Here I have my new reverb pedal, the Strymon BlueSky, which is amazing. Super beautiful sounding reverb. I had the Cathedral and I just found that it tended to disappear in the mix when the band was playing. So I finally took a plunge and got the BlueSky, and it's super awesome. I've wanted one forever. So this one has a few different modes on it, and you can combine the switches in different ways to get like several different sounds out of it. This is the normal reverb mode here. So I have it on a really long decay because if I'm using reverb at all, it's probably because I'm doing something ambient, so I want it to kind of be ringing out behind me. And then here is the modulated mode, where it adds a bit of a chorus shimmer to it. So I really like that one, especially for kind of held out ambient stuff. I'm going to pair it with the tape delay on the Flashback here. And then the third mode is shimmer reverb, which is interesting for sure. Here's what it does. It adds this kind of angelic octave choir behind you. It sounds like angels singing. Which sounds awesome. It's super beautiful sounding, but I've also found that in like a real world situation that can get kind of overpowering. What I've really landed on that I love the shimmer for is our church doesn't usually have a synth player, and you can almost using the pre-delay and then different settings on the shimmer, you can kind of make like a synth pad that just goes behind your playing. So this is my favorite thing to do with the shimmer verb is I'll set the decay like all the way up, shimmer mode, plate, and then mix kind of medium. And then this pre-delay controls where it kicks in. So if I have this low, it's right when I start playing. And if I have it long, it's like well after I start playing. So I put it kind of midway, and then I can play stuff and that'll just kind of create like a wash of shimmery stuff behind me. So I find that goes a long way in covering for not having like a synth player playing pads behind you. And then finally here I have my little Ditto looper. It's the simplest possible loop pedal, just has one button and one knob. And I go over this in other videos. I don't really use the looper to create like discrete loops that actually repeat so much as I use it to create like a wash of ambience for like transitions. And the key to building a background loop with something like this is you need to start with like a block of silence, because if I'm creating a loop, there's always going to be like a hard beginning to when I hit go on the loop pedal. So let me try and demonstrate how this would work. If I do it this way, you can hear that cut. Whereas if I do it this way, if I create like a loop of silence first, and just have that going, and I'll make it a few seconds long and then get that looping, and it's just looping silence right now. And then I create my loop, I can bypass that problem. And then there's my random background loop in C, and I can use that to get like between two different songs and kick it off when I don't need it. So I glossed past this earlier, but there's one more pedal on the board, and in terms of signal chain, it goes between these two, I think, but I've mounted it underneath. So I'm going to flip this over. I have an Electro-Harmonix Silencer here, which is a noise gate, and it's always on, and I never change the settings, so I've just mounted it to the bottom of the board here, and it's just there. It's just a noise gate. It's when I'm not playing, it kills any kind of like hiss that would be going on. But I have that in the signal chain between these two, mainly just because that's how I could get the cables to run and put it down here. But that's my secret noise gate mounted to the bottom. While I have this flipped over, here's what I've done to kind of organize the cables. Is I have these little grabber things that I just run the cables through, and then I have a couple of like bundles of Velcro holding them on. So a couple of notes when you get into like a really giant pedal board like this. One thing is, in terms of fitting the most possible pedals onto a board, these Hosa Pancake cables have been my best friend. My preferred cable is still the Planet Waves patch cable, but there's so much room this needs between pedals that for most of the board I've crammed them tight with these Pancake cables, and they've done really well by me. Like, they're kind of cheap, and I wasn't sure I trusted them, but I've never had any trouble. They don't seem to add any noise to the signal chain, and I can get these pedals really close now. So I, for one, kind of endorse those. So that is the 2016 edition of my pedalboard videos. I want to say it's the final one, but I've said that every time, and I keep changing stuff. So for now, at least, this is where I've landed. Some of these are boutique, some of these are still, you know, Boss and like typical brands. I don't have a preference either way. I'm not a boutique snob, but I'm also not opposed to them. And some of these, I mean, the Timmy is not any more expensive than the Turbo Tube Screamer that it kicked off. So, I mean, sometimes boutique doesn't even really mean expensive. But these are the pedals I've landed on. If you liked anything that you heard with my little clips that I was playing, I never remember to plug my own band, but you could check us out at thepraiserecord.com. Most of the clips that I played to demonstrate the pedals in this video are from songs of ours, and you can hear some of these pedals actually in action on those songs. Hope you enjoyed.